Hello, and welcome to Mixology, where we launch each episode mixing up a beverage as we discuss how customer education and customer marketing mix together as scale engines to customer success. I'm Kristine Kukich, and along with Shannon Howard, we're talking about how customer education can be the foundation of training for a wider variety of audiences to expand your reach, while we sip an autumn sparkler made with the tastes of fall. Here's the ingredients. 2 ounces of bourbon. I've got some Freeland bourbon based out of my hometown in Portland, Oregon, and some sparkling cider, as local as you can find. And this one is an easy mix. Just have your champagne glass handy. Pour the bourbon in the bottom, add the sparkling cider to fill the glass, mix with a stir stick, and I garnished mine with some fresh cranberries. Sorry for the holiday delay, but grab your beverage and enjoy the conversation. Here we go. So we are back with our fall episode of Mixology. And so, of course, there's the drink, right? I don't know where the best way to see this one is. This is an autumn sparkler. So if you haven't made it yet, again, go back. It's the recipe is always at the beginning. And we're talking this time about the types of training that exist within an organization and how they mix together. Really, it's Shannon and I have talked a lot already about cross-functionalness within an org and the fact that you have to do it and you need it and how to do it better and that kind of thing. But one of the questions that's popped up a lot for me lately has been, who really owns customer training, sales training, channel partner training, and how does that integrate or not with what you do internally around product and any other learning and development projects that you have through most likely HR, right? So the structure for that, I believe that if it's product related, customer education should own it all. That's just kind of the way that I think. Shannon's nodding her head. So, but right, Shannon, I think that's what we're for, right? That's what customer ed does. Is it helps clarify product for anyone who needs to know that, not just for customers.
Yeah, I think product, yes. And then if we kind of think about the concepts and themes surrounding our product too. So if you think about more of that kind of industry education, how do I help you do your job better? That all falls under customer education, but we can expand our definition of customer to be a paid customer, a prospective customer, an internal customer, a partner customer, right? And they all have different training needs, right? Your support team is going to need to know your product a lot more in depth than your marketing or sales team, who maybe needs to be trained more on the industry and the value propositions relating to your product. But I think there's an opportunity for customer education to kind of own all of that.
We are starting to see that ownership happen, right? I'm talking with directors, managers of teams, where they're saying, I just inherited sales enablement, or I just inherited channel partner training for, and again, that kind of falls into two camps, right? Sales enablement and or implementation enablement, and what goes along with all of that. But one of the themes that we've been talking about in the monthly content council discussions is how some of the base content is the same for all four of those entities, right? Sure. Because the how-to part of it, whether we're grabbing that content from written knowledge-based articles or tech docs or something like that, or we're building it into what we do in some kind of education forum, whatever you're doing for your portal, right? Whether it's video or follow along exercises or whatever you've got going on. The base content, right? Those smallest component pieces can be shared across that spectrum. How you go in and create an expense voucher or whatever is the same for everybody, right? The concept of configuring what that looks like for your people is the same, regardless of whether you're in any of those groups. The challenge, I think, then becomes, right, being able to message it, as you said earlier, right, where we get the the functionality of breadth and depth,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sales has a tendency to need more breadth,
Mm-hmm.
but post sales tends to need more depth, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think too, when I'm thinking about kind of sales enablement and even partners, there are differences. So there's the product component, but then there's right, true sales enablement is more than content. It's the process and the technology to support the sales team in selling, effectively selling and efficiently selling. And so I think it makes sense for there to be someone who owns that, but kind of like with customer marketing and customer marketing does not necessarily have to create the education content. Sometimes customer education reports into customer marketing, or customer marketing works on education content. But they're helping to bring that to the teams, right? They're helping to bring that to the sales team and introduce them to the content. How do you use that to sell? Making sure that they're taking those trainings. So I think there's still a world wherein you have partner success managers or channel partner managers, however a company kind of structures that, but they're using this content that's developed,
Exactly.
and it makes education that center of excellence, because I think what we've seen happen is that people who do not have an understanding of how people learn, just creating content. And just because you put something in words on a piece of paper does not necessarily mean it's training content, you know?
Truth. Showing is not training. Telling is not training. Isn't that our
Uh,
mantra?
Telling isn't training. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just because it's a list. And I think that speaks to the why part again, right? What we focus on regardless of this is whether or not we're focusing on a why, and the why is what changes for each of those groups, right? The why for customers is do the job better, right? We want them to be more efficient, more effective at the job that they do using our product.
Mm-hmm.
With
I thought about
sales,
this
right? It's different.
with
Go ahead.
uh I've thought about this with product marketing. I've referred to product marketing as the wrapper in which I put things. So like maybe the content itself doesn't change. And the picture that came to mind is more like a picture frame, right? What's in the picture frame, you get something from the store, and that doesn't change, but you might change out the picture frame. You might use a black one or a light wood color or a dark wood color or a gold frame or a silver frame, right? Whatever your vibe is, or if you're changing that, but the frame around it changes, but the content remains the same. And so I think that's true of a lot of our different audiences, is the meat and potatoes of what's in the frame doesn't change, but then how we talk about it might change.
Exactly. Yeah, that wrapper on the outside is what is going to be targeted for the perspective of the audience that we're servicing at that moment. Which is what we always say, right? Know your audience, because you deliver the best messages when you understand their perspective, whether it is customers or sales or partners or even internals. I mean,
Partners or different types of customers.
exactly. Well, and because a persona is persona,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it really matters which persona you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with at that moment in time, as long as you're designing that overall content
Mm-hmm.
for that audience.
Mm-hmm.
Those kernels and nuggets are can be reusable,
Mm-hmm.
and again, object oriented content development, right, I
I'm
guess is
familiar.
the technical term for it, right?
Okay. Evan Hall just wrote a blog for us on repurposing training content, but really it's more of that modular approach of how do I
Mhm.
take something, break it down into its smallest pieces so that I can then, Lego style build whatever it is that I need
Exactly,
to build.
exactly, and that's what it's all about, is understanding that you have all of these building bricks that you
Mm-hmm.
can mix and match into whatever you need them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that part of it is where we run into the biggest hurdle, because of the cross-functional silos where content is being really created throughout the organization. How do we corral that
Mm-hmm.
in a way that makes sense for all of the audiences to benefit from it, right? Because that, I think, is one of the hardest parts, aside from just the technology issues that run into uh, crossing different boundaries, right? Internal L&D versus customer facing content
Mhm.
can be challenging, right, to
Sure.
manage that content. So the same with channel partners, because you
Mhm.
may have different learning requirements if you're dealing
True.
with channel partners, or even with sales. I mean, it could be that your learning portal is not home base for sales
Mhm.
content. It is a sales tool like Seismic, right?
Mhm.
That holds
Yeah.
sales
We
content.
have enablement content, but then I think thinking about those different types of learning, because like a salesperson, they have, maybe sales training and sales coaching on a methodology, whether they're using
Mhm.
Medic or MedPick or Challenger or whatever.
Right. All of
And
the
then you have,
numerous
yeah, like
choices.
continuing education. So like we use LinkedIn Learning for continuing education content, right? And then so you could assign people content, or you can choose whatever the heck you want to learn on LinkedIn Learning. And so you have access to that. But then there's more of that product focused content. And so a place where people can have access, but that's like the whole personalized learning journey thing is, can I
Mhm.
see what's most relevant for me instead of a catalog of hundreds of pieces of content that aren't necessarily relevant to me or where I am in my journey and what I need to know today.
Which weaves us into the personalization aspect to learning today, right? We should be able to deliver a personalized learning path that is dependent on the persona that you focus on, and the how and the why all weaving together to make that picture, right, to get it into whatever it needs to be. And I think that is still challenging, even with the push in AI that we have now, right, with the construct that we have around being able to do that in most learning portal products now, right? LMSs will provide that kind of journey selection options through profiling and stuff. So we can say, well, yes, they all need to work together. We can understand that segmenting them is really no different than uh, the persona driven activity that we already know when we're dealing
Mhm.
with our customers. How do we then manage the success? How do we measure it so that we know how to manage it better across,
Mhm.
again, when we have so many different ways that content could be delivered?
Mhm.
There's the question, right? I don't, that the answer
Yeah.
is hard still, right?
I think
It's getting easier. I think, again, AI is your friend here, because this data may be coming from multiple different locations,
mhm.
and short of data lakes, which in our business we don't often if have a data person
Mhm.
that is their job, and we don't
Yeah.
often have an ops
Sometimes
person that is dedicated to this in either customer ed or customer marketing, to be honest. I mean, it's rare.
I mean, that's where I think these roles require you to be an influential leader because often you don't have those dedicated resources. But how do you, Dale Carnegie style, win friends and influence people to help you out with things, right? That maybe you don't have a dedicated resource, but you can tap somebody internally who can help you. But I think measurement always starts with like intentional design of, well, what are we trying to drive for partners? What are we trying to drive for sales? What are we trying to drive for customers? What are those goals? And then we're designing content to help us drive those goals. So whether it's about reduce time to value, right? It's about ramp time for salespeople and customers and partners, right? We want them to get to a point of value faster. Okay, well, now we can design content. But we want to know, our COO, I love this. She'll say like, this is the goal, and then say as measured by blank, so not just like, hey, here's our
Right.
aspirational goal, but how will we actually measure that? Like, what metric are we looking at? What platform are we using? How are we tying data together to tell that story and look at that metric? Because I do think that that's maybe a missing piece is we know that a lot of education is designed to increase performance, reduce churn, increase time to value, increase expansion revenue or new customer acquisition. But how are we measuring that? And if you don't have a way to say, okay, we're looking at, how education content impacted lead volume or quality of leads going over to sales, or if we don't know, people who participate in education are more likely to renew or more likely to expand, if we don't know kind of what that would be.
I just had a conversation with, and I'm getting ready to have a more detailed conversation with Christy Falterusso in a couple of weeks, I think, around that construct, right? Like my passion project for 2025, early announcement, everybody, is identifying a trained user. How do you follow through and dig into your data to find a trained user, right? What structure within organizations will allow us to do that? How do we figure it out, right?
Sure.
And for some people, like at Taleo, we established that if we had one administrator who had gone through all of our admin training, just one, regardless of how large the organization was or how small the organization was, if that user existed in their organization as an admin for the product for configuration, that the chance of retention on that contract was like 20% higher than any other combination. Some orgs identify it differently. Tom Studdard has a value that he did when he was back at ZoomInfo that focuses on that idea of identifying your trained user. And for them, the combination was different, but it was still, there were certain courses. If the users took X course and Y course and Z course, and they took all three of those, their chance of sticking around was higher than if it wasn't. Now, again, Adam Avramescu always talks about causation, correlation, they're not the same. But I think this is a correlating value, right? We can say that we know that these things are true. When this happens, retention is better than when it doesn't happen. And so
sticky parts of your product,
right,
identifying what are those sticky things that if people do these, they're less likely, right? Because you're never going to get 100% everything, that if someone does this 100% of the time, they're going to renew. You just can't. There's so many other variables that cause people to not renew that aren't in your control. But it's when you think about control what you can control, you can help people to be exposed to, learn, and use parts of the product that make them more likely. So we're increasing the likelihood.
Truth, right? So that if we learn that sales enablement produces better sales and more aligned with ICP type sales, if sales understands this particular part of our product better, right? Because then they can target more effectively when they sell. The same with channel partners. I've got much more experience with channel partners as implementers rather than salespeople. But I think the process there is the same. If we clearly identify what a good implementation looks like through onboarding, training, in addition to just the practice of implementation, whether it's product skills or project management skills or all of the things that are a part of implementing the product, we can target making those people more prepared so that implementations are more successful. Because again, when we tie back, right, Jeff Kushmarek has some numbers against implementations that go well, that stay on target, that align and produce time to value relatively quickly, also churn less. And education plays a huge part in making those numbers a reality, right? Through onboarding training and again, training the channel partners that do the implementations, regardless of whether you're big enough to include something like, if you want to be a gold partner, right, you need to have
do this, that, and the third,
right? You have to have 20% of your implementation team needs to be certified in our product. Again, whatever the values are that you assign to tiers potentially with that, right? You can certainly do that, but again, we're proving at that point that implementers who have a percentage of their people properly trained in our product perform better than those that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have to come back and clean up after you enough times, you won't get to stay a partner with us very long.
Yes.
Usually,
Okay.
right?
So we've talked about these different types of people, audiences that need to be trained, and how that's no different really than our persona-based content development, right? We're already creating different types of training for different personas. We're just more personas of different types of audiences. It is important for those teams to work together because, to your content council point, we're all creating all of this disparate content. Are we telling the same story? Are we all using the same value propositions? Are we teaching people the same things? When you have siloed training efforts, sometimes people are teaching things that maybe it's like, wait a minute, that's not actually a best practice. That's not how we want to teach people how to use our product. So then education can become a center of excellence. If we think about those, like, what are the jobs to be done? How do we help people do those jobs? And then that might take different forms. So we're really creating partnerships with other teams to serve up the content to the right people. And then we're looking at what are the objectives for these different types of content education and training programs, to help us figure out, well, what kind of content are we going to design? Because partner training, customer education can take so many different forms. So it's like, what is that needle that you're trying to move? Where can you have the most business impact? And then how are we measuring that?
So that, in a nutshell, go out and conquer this whole concept, because customer education is taking on more responsibility in this area, right? And across these different parts of the organization. So if you're already doing it, comment, let us know what you're already doing. If you are not yet doing it and want to, comment as well. And then we can maybe have some more in-depth conversations about this. But I think it's important for us to understand we have those, the personas are not necessarily just our customer personas. It's more than that.
And to
And
have a vision for kind of bringing all these together. Because if they are siloed, I don't think it's simply pointing out that we could be more efficient and effective bringing it all together in the same way that you're getting buy-in for anything else that you're doing. It's the right time, right people, right place, right message, right pitch, to actually bring all these people together. I think a lot of it starts with doing what you do now exceptionally well. Because I think what we've both seen is that people who crush it get trusted with new things, right? And we
right,
saw
exactly,
Melissa
exactly.
Van Pelt, right? But
Yep,
she's
right.
talking
That way
about,
back to this time last year, right, when we were doing this,
what?
right?
That's wild. But yeah, that when you do an exceptional job, that you're entrusted with more. And so that's a critical part of making the case, is like, let's crush what we have, and then we earn the right to bring in these other teams.
That's it then.
Yeah.
Do exactly what Shannon said, and you too can be as successful as she is. All right. See you guys next time. We'll come back and talk some more in the next session. Later, get up. Bye.